Okay guys, so we've got the grip fitted up and we've done the ramps and all that, showing you how to do all that. The next step in the process would be to do some guide placements. So I'll take these guides on into a position where I think they're fairly close, and to prove that we've put a reel on the rod and we've got it under some sort of load to have a look and see what it looks like. Well, I can see straight away that it's not quite right. A couple of the guides are in pretty good position, but there's a couple of guides here that I'm going to have to shift and get the transition of the line a bit smoother. You can see here in the middle, between the stripper guide and the next guide along, that we haven't got a really smooth transition that follows the curve of the blank. So what we're going to have to do is untape these guides and move them along a little bit, and what we're trying to do is follow the curve of the blank, make the transition as smooth as we possibly can. Okay, as you can see in there, the gap along the top here is pretty good. It's following the blank fairly nicely, and down here it's sort of, if we loaded that up any more, you can see that it's starting to get fairly close to the blank. However, the top still looks pretty good. So what we're going to have to do is, we can't just shift this guide, we're going to need to shift the stripper guide as well, and try and get this smooth transition through it. So luckily I prepared one earlier, so I'll just take this one out of the rack and we'll put the other one in. Okay guys, like I said, I prepared another one earlier, and I've made the adjustments that I showed you on the previous rod. You'll notice a different rod. We've got gold rollers on this one. Last one had black on it, so pretty much the same blank, same setup, except for the rollers are different. Anyway, so you can see now that the transition of the line is following the curve of the rod nicely. So I'm reasonably happy with that. I know that if we put this under a bit more load, obviously if we get the rod under a hell of a lot of load, we can't really get rid of the flat spots there, but we've got a basic curve following the blank along there, so I'm pretty happy with that it's going to perform under pressure and not cause any issues with line hitting the blank or anything like that. And just about have to high stick this thing, I'd say, to get the line down against the blank there. I've got about 6 kilos of drag on this thing, and the rod's got a fair bit of load on it, so I'm reasonably happy with that. So I would then, once I'm happy with this, I'll go along and mark the centres of the guides, and then we'll take that over to the lathe and we'll do some underbinds on it, and move on to the next step of the process. Okay guys, as you can see here, I've gone along after the last step and marked the centres of where all the guides are going. So the next step is I'm going to plan out what sort of an underbind I'm going to do on that, and it's really important with roller guides to do an underbind. So here we've got our stripper guide, and so what I'm going to do is measure point to point on the feet of the stripper guide, and I can see that it's 65 mil long. So what I'm going to do is make the underbind about 84 mil in length. So I'll go ahead and mark that out. 42 either side of the centre will be my start point. And try and mark this as accurately as you can, because it keeps all the bind symmetrical. So next thing I'll do is measure the inside of the guide feet, and I can see that that's 26 mil, so I'll make the centre block about 20 mil. So we'll go 10 mil either side for our 20 mil. We've got all these marks on the blank ready to go, then we can just start binding them. When we get to a mark, we know we're going to do an inlay. So alright, so the next step is, and I'll point out that with this only being a 10 kilo rod, I'm going to underbind in an A thread, which will give you a little bit more detail with your trims. So on my mark there, I'm just going to start the thread 2 or 3 mil back from the mark, and just get it started. Do about 2 or 3 wraps there just to secure the tag end, and then we'll start cutting some inlay metallic threads and put them in. So I got some metallic thread here. I'm using a couple of different colours here. We've got like a metallic aqua blue if you like. So what I do is I roll it around and make sure that I start the inlay on the underside of the guide. So I'll give that a couple of rolls to secure it, then put my next, which I'm using the wrong colour here. Where's my silver? There it is. I need a silver, so I'll just take a bit of silver, inlay that as well, and give that a couple of turns to secure it. Okay, so then the next step is my first will be a blue, so I'll give that 2 turns of blue, which basically means that you come over the top and underneath your main thread line, and then zip it up underneath there. Except I did that wrong. Right, so then I'll just give that a couple of turns of black in between, and as I go around with my 2 turns, I'll just pack it in, make sure it's all nice and tight, no gaps in it. All right, and then the next step is that we'll give it 2 turns of silver, same way that we just did with the blue. I reach around. Sometimes these other tag ends get in your way a little bit, but yeah, just persevere with that. Okay, so there's our 2 turns of silver in there as well. So again, we'll just go around slowly, make sure we've got all the threads in alignment, pack them all in so that it's nice and straight. Once we've got probably 3 or 4 turns over the top, we can then tighten. Okay, so what I do with them is I just grab the 2 metallics and just pull them tight, snip them off, get them out the way. Same with the tag end of the black, and then we'll just bind up to 5 mil or so before the next mark. And then we have to inlay some more. Some people can put a really long inlay in underneath the underbind, which will do these trims here and the ones up in the centre. If that's the way you want to do it, go ahead and do it. With metallic thread, if it gets tensioned too hard, it'll fray and won't look as good as what it would if it wasn't. So inlay the next 2. Right, so we'll come up to the mark here, and then what I want to do with this one is untangle them for a start, and then I'm going to go 1 silver, tuck it back in, and again keep it straight, packed. 1 silver, 1 black, 2 of the aqua blue, so 1, 2, tuck that back in, and again go around and straighten it all up, tighten it in. Bit of mucking around, but it's worth it in the end because you get a nice intricate bind. And then we're going to do 1 more silver here. Okay, so there we go. That gets first of the centre trims done. Now what I like to do is I'm going to count. I've got 1 black, so 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then you can pack it a little bit. And then the next thing we're going to do, I'll remember that I'm at 10 there. So I'll put a pull through underneath here, about 4 or 5 mil back from where the metallics are laying. So 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So remember that for this stripper bind, I've got 18 turns of black between my trims. So to finish the trim off, I'll just snip this black thread off, and then just got to have a look at my pattern over here. Okay, so what I've got then is 1 silver, which I've got to unravel from there. So just silver over the top, 1 turn, 1 turn of black, 1 turn of black, and then 3 turns of the aqua blue to finish it off before we get to our centre block. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now that's the finish of our trim before we get to the centre block. So what I do then is I get all 3 threads over the top, cut them off about 1.5 inches long like that, put all 3 of them through the pull through, hold them tight, drag it in close, and then snip it off down near the pull through, and then pull it back and away from you, and there you go. So you've got all 3 of those tied off. Then all you have to do is just go around the edge, straighten it all up like that. Okay, and then I'll go along and snip all these off. So I'll basically pull them up through the main thread and then snip them, and I'll flick back underneath so you don't get any tag ends hanging out. You can do this with a razor blade if you like, but I've made too many mistakes with the razor blade, so I'll stick with the scissors. Then I'll give it a light burnish. Okay, so then what we'll do is we'll start from the mark at the other end of the rod back here, or at the other end of the guide, sorry. So again, 3 or 4 mil back from your white mark. Get it over the top. You can start your thread with a piece of tape if you like. I just find it a pain in the arse with tape, so I just hold it with my finger. I've done that many of them now that it's pretty easy for me to do. So again, our 2 trims for the ends. Lay the first one in. 1, 2, 3. And then lay your second one in. Give it a couple more turns. I'm going to cut this black tag end off out of my way this time. One less thread getting in my way. Give it 1 more, and then same pattern as last time. Two blues, 2 blacks, and straighten as we go. 2, and then 2 silvers. Keep your trims nice and small. Putting blocks of 4 or 5 on the ends sort of makes it look a little bit Kmarty, if you like. But it's up to you. It's your taste, your rod. You do whatever you want to do. Again, just tighten them down, snip them off out the way, and up to the next mark. Well, again, pull up 4 or 5 mil before the mark so you can put your next lot of inlays in. So we'll do a silver, 2, 3, with a few turns. Lay the blue in there. Okay, so we'll get that up to, the only thing different here is I'm going to put my thread in for my centre block, so you're going to need enough thread here to fill that whole centre block, so I've given myself a couple of metres of the pale gold that I'm going to use for the centre block. Put that in there, put it up the end of the rod, out of your way a bit. You tape it down if you like, saves it getting all tangled up and everything. Alright, so come up to our mark again and we do our first lot of inlays, same as we did on the other side. So we've got 1 silver, again tighten as we go, 1 black, already done, and 2 blues, one black, and 1 silver. Okay. Get that all nice and straight. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'll just and 9. Again, pull these threads up to the center a bit, tighten them up a bit, and put the pull through back in. About 3 or 4 mil below where you 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Okay, so now that's going to be perfectly symmetrical because we've counted threads. If you go try and measure in this, you could a mil out or 2 mil out, and when you finish the bind, you can see that it's not symmetrical. You're better off in the center of your underbind counting your turns of thread, and that way you know it's going to be exactly the same width as the one on the opposite side. So we cut that off, and then we'll finish it off again by going 1 silver, 1 black, and 3 blue. 1, 2, 3, and again bring them all over the top of your pull through. Hold it in place with your finger. Hopefully you can see this on the camera right. Put all 3 of your threads through the pull through. Again, pull it up tight until it hits the thread, snip it off, and there we go. So basically that's all the trim's done. All we've got left now to do is fill the block. And so what we do with that, quite simple. I'll just untangle or unravel this gold thread off the end of the rod here. Try and remember to give yourself enough thread. It doesn't matter if you've got 300 or 400 mil of this left over. When you get to fill up your block, it's a whole lot better than being 5 or 6 turns short. So I put the pull through underneath. We don't really want to pull this too tight. We're just going to sit it in there and roll it around until we get to... You can put your pull through in halfway along if you want to. I just find it easier to put the pull through in because we're doing this by hand. So, and remember not to pull too hard on this metallic thread because you'll get it. I've already got one little bugger up there, but it's not too bad. All right, so again, snip it off, 1.5 inches long, thereabouts, into the pull through, pull it down firm, bring it up to there, and pull it away. Right, so next thing we'll go through and snip all these tag ends out. And go along and give it a burnish. There we go. There's our first underbind done. So we'll follow the same pattern there as we go down the rod and the diameter of the blank gets a bit smaller and the guides are a little bit smaller. We would change the number of counts. We might come down to the next one, make it 15 count, and same on the other side, and it'll be a slightly smaller block of gold depending on the measurements that you use. You want to try and make it look symmetrical all the way down the rod. So that's a fairly tidy, intricate but simple underbind that you can use. Quite happy if you use this pattern. You can change the colours out and make the centre block a metallic red or a metallic blue or something. You change the colours around, whatever suits you. Okay, so what we'll do is I'll go along and finish the underbinds on this, and then we'll bring up the next step. Okay guys.